Good morning. It's a bit early after the enormous banquet last night, but we have a panel that is trying to address some of the major challenges that we face in the world. A key proposition of this panel is that many of the answers to these challenges, many of the solutions, come via the vector of cities. A lot of what we think of as global problems, environmental challenges, questions of violence, it is in cities where these issues assume concrete, practical, and actionable formats. We have a great panel. We have very little time. We have a huge subject. So I love the way the four of you look so. This was not my idea, by the way, to create this effect that I'm like the master here of ceremony, so to say. But it looks very, very good.
Wake up.
Right. So I was asked to introduce some of the issues before addressing the panel. But let me just very quickly mention that we have Mayor Huldai from Tel Aviv, Mayor Reed from Atlanta. We have Pablo Farías from the Ford Foundation, who specializes in poverty and inequality and violence questions, so all these adorable subjects that cities face. And we have Vivek Badrinath from CEO for Business Services at Orange, who will address the technology question. Now, I have been asked to speak a bit about not just to introduce our distinguished panels, but actually to give you some of my ideas and findings from my research. I will do that very briefly. I was asked to speak for 10 minutes, but I'm going to make that shorter because I think the value is really in the panel. I just want to put a few key points out there. The first one is that in this global epoch, in this global economy, global cultural space that we are shaping, global trading zone, whatever the terms, the vectors that work for you, but I repeat, in this epoch, this global epoch, there is a kind of ironic twist, and I think it often gets overlooked. The notion is that given globalization, all urban economies are becoming similar. It's a very common notion. That is only partly true. Everything that is consumer markets, yes. But when it comes to what this global economy really needs with its particular kinds of highly specialized capabilities, that is no longer true. And then it is the specialized differences of cities that matter. This is not the old imperial form of the global, where you had the capital of empire, the city that had it all. This is absolutely different. This is a distributed, networked system where it is the specialized differences of cities that matter. Think of China. 4 major financial centers: Shanghai, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Beijing. They're radically different. The US, 2 major financial centers: New York and Chicago, radically different. Think of the European zone: Frankfurt, Paris, London, radically different. I mentioned finance as an example, partly because finance is so highly specialized. But you can see that with all advanced services. You can see it with questions of technology. Boston is different from San Francisco, Silicon Valley, et cetera. So the question then becomes, why is it that the experience of so many people and the observations of so many people is that urban economies are becoming the same? I think there is an intervening variable, an intervening process that I would like to pull out, which is that there is a globalizing of the standards for building the state-of-the-art office districts, the state-of-the-art consumption luxury space, etc., the state-of-the-art airport, and so on. that creates a sense, no matter how brilliant the architects, no matter how original, whatever they add to the standardized, but that adds a sense of something that is homogenizing, in fact. But, and this is something that I have really tried to understand, it seems to me that more and more of the built environment, even if it looks like an office building, is actually infrastructure. And in being infrastructure, it is both necessary but indeterminate. Simple example, train tracks. They can be used for all kinds of things, to carry people, to carry cattle, to carry bombs, whatever. So once we begin to think of this juxtaposition of a globalizing of standards, we have that for manufacturing production, we have that for all kinds of things, but also for building the state-of-the-art built environment, that is homogenizing. But that, in fact, increasingly what we used to think of as office building is now infrastructure, then the question becomes, how is it getting used? Once you ask that question, you open up to understand the particular differences of cities. When you think about this sort of, global world of cities in those terms, then, and I should clarify that I'm talking about a limited number of cities. Most cities are pretty routinized. Most cities are medium-sized. Most cities are not global at all. But the kinds of cities that I have been focusing on, and certainly that these two mayors represent, are part of that network of global cities. But if you think about it that way, then this whole notion that cities are competing with each other is weakened. Yes, sure, they compete a bit, but far less than one might think. And then this question of how can cities partner, how can they work together, becomes a far more viable question. It means that confronted with these major challenges that I started talking about, the question is, how can we work together? Because we're not competing as much together with each other as the common imagery suggests. And so to me, that is extremely important. Second major issue, which I can address only briefly, is that the kind of economic systems and the kind of property systematics that we have, privatization, etc., have added to the challenges of cities. Questions of inequality, questions of poverty, questions of a kind of unemployment that suggests that some people will never have a job or a normal sort of work life. And one can then ask, what is the locus? What is a critical instance where these issues of poverty, inequality, street violence can actually be best addressed? Is it national governments? I think a bit yes. But in the city, especially in the big city, these are issues that become very concrete, very practical, very urgent. I think it is also the city that has that possibility of innovating. And here is, I think, a second then major issue that invites a kind of collaboration, a partnering, a thinking, how can we solve this? What have you done that works in your city? Because you have very innovative concepts, but it's high risk to put them out there. Let's try it in my city. If you know that another city has done it, that it helps in a way. There is a whole set of other issues that I would love to address, but that's not possible. Perhaps they come out in the discussion. So I would now like to turn to the panel and ask Mayor Huldai from Tel Aviv to tell us a bit about Tel Aviv, your sort of sense of Tel Aviv, and also the particularities of Tel Aviv. How is Tel Aviv different from other major cities?
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, wake up. Enjoy your time. I try to do it. So, bonjour. I am the mayor of Tel Aviv. I'm very happy to be with you today. And the topic and the discussion is the problems of our cities. But with your permission, I would like to start with some good things about my city. I like to call Tel Aviv the world's largest small city, only 52 square kilometers. It has 14 kilometers of beach and 120 kilometers of bicycle routes. It has 200,000 trees, and we plant another one every 2 hours. Tel Aviv is a very young city. 33% of our population are between the age of 18 to 33, and it doubled in the last 13 years. It is a city that celebrates pluralism and tolerance. We embrace everybody, Arabs and Jews, religious and secular, Israeli and foreign, legal and illegal. We have one of the best nightlife scene in the world, 1,748 bars and clubs, one for every 220 residents. These are some of the advantages of our city. And now let's talk about our challenges. As you can see from the map, we are culturally part of the Western society, but located at a distance. We have very few commercial ties with our neighbors, unfortunately. We have almost no natural resources. Unfortunately, we are the Holy Land, not the oily land. And we speak a language that nobody in the world understands. So the question is, how do you develop a successful economic center in such conditions? The answer is you focus on creativity and entrepreneurship. Today, Tel Aviv is a technological center. We have over 600 startups, research, development centers, and international companies like Google and Converse. Tel Aviv's connection to the startup culture began on the day of the city was born. Actually, Tel Aviv is a startup by itself. It is founded 100 years ago when 66 families left Jaffa, 66 entrepreneurs. They decided to build a city on the empty sand dunes. They dreamed of a garden city in a place that had no water. They dreamed of a city of the future in the homeland of the past. In short, it was a classic startup. Big dreams, but small chances. Surprisingly, they succeeded. The founders of Tel Aviv had a vision, and like all startup entrepreneurs, they were very ambitious and creative. From its birth, Tel Aviv was always the nation's financial center. Last year, we were rated AAA stable by Standard & Poor's. Tel Aviv has always understood the importance of culture. This is very important for creative people. Many times, mayors ask me how the city managed to attract so many creative people, so much business activity, and my answer, so simple, is about quality. All is about quality of life. The secret is accessibility to everyone. The city cannot only be attractive to business people or tourists, but it has to be attractive to its residents. You have to provide something that looks obvious, like nearest kindergarten, playground, parks, high-quality schools, good community center, a safe environment. All of these are very, very important, and it is not coming easily. However, once you have a successful city, you always have a new set of problems. Since the city is so attractive, everyone in Israel wants to live in it. Housing is expensive. Tel Aviv is the only city in the world where when prices of real estate go up, everyone says the mayor is lousy. Transportation is also a major issue. We have 400,000 residents, but 1 million commuters every day. But we do not have efficient public transportation, like here in Paris. And this is a real obstacle for development of this metropolis. Finally, we are witnessing a new phenomenon. Not only Israeli wants to live in Tel Aviv. Today, 1 of every 9 residents in my city entered the country illegally. This is a growing political and social issue. You know it in Europe. Let's get to those creative people. Once you have an attractive city, all you have to do is to let these creative people to create. You have to help and be supportive. In the past decade, we created a perfect ecosystem for creative Israeli. This year, we launched a new strategy to go global. In 10 years, we want to be an attractive city for creative people from abroad, a sort of Silicon Valley of countries outside of the United States. We will develop more working spaces, more hubs, more academic programs. I hope within 10 years to see many creative young people from Europe and Asia in our city. And since everyone here in the room is creative and young, please take a piece of paper and a pen. Because I'm going to share with you the most important thing you need to know when you come to Tel Aviv. Take with you to Tel Aviv one pair of shorts for the beach. Another pair of shorts for your business meeting. A laptop, don't worry about internet, we provide free wireless in the public spaces. Don't eat a week before you come, our restaurants are amazing, and don't bring your umbrella, you won't need it. So thank you very much, merci. I hope to see you soon in my country.
Very good.
Mayor Reed, tell us about Atlanta.
Well, I don't know what to say. You all only have to look at me. First of all, good morning. I'm so delighted to be here. I come from Atlanta, which is probably the center of commerce in the southeastern region of the United States. And I've been mayor there for about 2 years. I'm probably here, and you probably know the city of Atlanta because we hosted the 1996 Olympic Games, which really was our entry onto the world stage. But there was a story about Atlanta long before that, as the home of Dr. Martin Luther King and so many other important Americans who really shaped the U.S.'s focus on civil and human rights and really moved us forward during some very turbulent times in our country. I came today because I believe that cities are going to be where the action is over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And certainly in the United States, if cities aren't strong and don't get our act together, then the U.S. and I believe the world just simply isn't going to do very well. In the United States, about 80% of our GDP occurs in cities. The future growth of the world's GDP, about 65% of that's going to take place in cities. And the reason that I wanted to be here is I see increasing intransigence at the federal level, certainly in the United States with Washington, and really all across Europe and other parts of the world that suggests if you really want to make change, radical change that is, and move the world forward, you really have to be doing it in cities. And that's where collaboration comes into play. In the city of Atlanta over the past 10 years, we have been one of the 4 fastest growing metropolitan regions in the United States of America. We are the home to the largest concentration of Fortune 500 businesses in the South, the 4th largest concentration of Fortune 500 businesses in the United States of America. So when you drink a Coca-Cola, I hope you think of Atlanta. When you're in your hotel room and you turn to CNN, that's an Atlanta business. When you go to your door or receive a parcel from UPS, that's an Atlanta-based businesses. But not many people know that these global brands are really started by some terrific entrepreneurs in our city. As I sit here today, in just about 8 hours, we're going to open up the international terminal at our airport, Hartsfield-Jackson, and we're going to be able to connect to 80% of the United States in less than 2 hours, 50 countries, 75 international destinations, second only to New York. In our city, we have the busiest airport on the planet Earth. To give you some sense of what that means, the city of Atlanta handles 20 million more passengers than Beijing Airport every single year for a total of 92 million passengers. In the state of Georgia, we have the 4th fastest growing seaport in the United States of America, which I think bodes well for our future. But when you hear all of those things, I think the underlying fact that's going to bode well for us is that we are working together in partnership. On July 31, 10 different governments will come together across 10 different political jurisdictions, and we're all going to vote together. I think we're all jumping off a cliff together to fund about $7 billion in infrastructure a vote that has never occurred in the city of Atlanta or in the state of Georgia, really to fix our roads, create light rail, preserve about 1,300 acres of green space, create last mile connectivity in the city of Atlanta, and build a project called the Atlanta Beltline, and we're funding it across 10 governments. So in our city, Democrats and Republicans came together and put up a regional transportation tax of 1 penny to really fund infrastructure for our future. Because we really do believe that a dollar invested in infrastructure really is a dollar for the future. And that's why this conference is so vital. People who care about cities and who are passionate about what cities can become are going to be the drivers for the planet, because the conversations at the federal level just happen too slowly. And that's why you see mayors in the United States of America like Mayor Bloomberg, like Rahm Emanuel in Chicago. Rahm Emanuel left being the chief of staff for the President of the United States because he wanted to get something done. Mayor Bloomberg spent $150 million for a 3rd term in New York City because he was enjoying getting something done. So I came today just to encourage you to be involved and stay involved and to tell you that you're valuable and needed. And that if you really want to see your work implemented, if you really want to see a pilot that you can actually watch come into fruition, I think that we have the opportunity to be a very, very special partner for you. And that's why I'm glad to be here today.
Well, that's very interesting, and you seem to have solved what so many cities cannot solve, which is they have grown and they have entered multiple little administrative jurisdictions. Like I think Chicago, that area has 2,600 little administrative. I'm sure this is an issue that resonates with other cities as well. And how to deal with all these separate administrations. So that's a major accomplishment, what you just described there.
Well, we're going to know on July 31st. I don't want to prejudge.
Oh, I see.
But on July 31st,
it's too good to be true.
Yeah, on July 31st, we were all holding hands and jumping off the cliff together. Republicans and Democrats. Hadn't been done in the state of Georgia, which is a very conservative state politically. So in a presidential election year, we're going to be voting to tax ourselves to provide ourselves with infrastructure, which we haven't done in the history of our state.
It's really an impressive, it's making history in many ways, I would say, to achieve that. Pablo Farías from the Ford Foundation, you address questions of poverty, inequality, violence, all these adorable subjects that cities have. But you're going to start out by giving us sort of a more general, right? Something, yes.
Thank you, and I'm delighted to join the mayor of Tel Aviv, Mayor Reed, my colleague here from Orange, and have an opportunity to talk about what they've already been talking about, partnership and collaboration, and how cities innovate and build on the basis of this capacity to move beyond established systems and begin to create new tools, new processes, new forms of engagement of their different communities. And I want to talk in that sense about some of the struggles that Mayor Reed referred to in the history of Atlanta and how it got to be the city that it is today. And in that sense, I'm going to reflect particularly about the experiences of the Ford Foundation and its work in the United States and the uniqueness of the configuration of these processes in the US. But I want to also touch for a moment on the persistent problems that we're talking about here for cities in the developing world and the vision that ultimately is going to allow us to succeed, like in these examples that we have just heard about. And I want to talk about collaboration and partnership. And I know everybody has heard those are good things. We were probably told so in school when we were children. So I know that everybody expects that to be just a positive. But I also want to push us a bit and get us out of our comfort zone. And as we think of cities and the challenges that they represent, and we think of success in these processes of urban growth, we have some tough challenges to address. So let me first say, what is that vision of success for our work in a foundation, in a philanthropy that is seeking to advance social justice? And that is a vision of a city that is open to opportunity for the diverse communities, that welcomes immigrants and in that sense provides the space for their voice and participation, that sees democracy as something that emerges from cultural vibrancy, from cultural participation and expression, but also is a city that defines prosperity as a shared goal, not as a goal for a few, but as a shared goal. And we've been here in Paris for a few days and enjoying this wonderful city, but several of you in meetings during this few days mentioned something that to me is a tragic example of also the failure of cities. And that is an example from my hometown, Monterrey in Mexico. And that is in the news this week, a tragic event where 49 mutilated bodies turned up in a suburb of Monterrey. Now, Monterrey is the city that has the highest GDP per capita of all of Mexico. It's a city well known globally for its companies. It hosted the UN global meeting on development on financing of development in 2000 with the heads of the UN, the World Bank, the IMF. Over 80 presidents turned up in Monterrey as it declared itself a global city. And its higher education institutions are a model for Latin America. So what happened in this city? How did it come to be a city that is afraid, inhibited in its social interactions, that has so fundamentally failed to achieve this vision of justice? I think it's fundamentally a failure of collaboration, a failure of creating the connections, the vision of shared prosperity, the vision of justice and inclusion that we all aspire for cities and that we all see cities being the engine of. Now, Mayor Reed talked about Atlanta emerging from the challenges of the civil rights era. And I think the civil rights era gives us a great example of how partnership and collaboration build a field and build capacities to address these challenges. And certainly in the experience of the Ford Foundation, as I think of our work today, I often go back to what happened in the 70s when basically the leaders of government and the civil rights movement sought collaboration from philanthropy and asked philanthropy and the private sector to join government and create a new set of institutions, and led to the emergence of a very important field in the US, the community development field. Now, this is a field that we know well today. It has thousands of institutions throughout neighborhoods in the US. It provides financing for affordable housing. It provides financing for local business development. But it is a field that emerged from basic strategies of collaboration. It emerged from new institutional forms that were created, the Community Development Corporation, the Community Development Finance Institution, forms that today are familiar, but were created from those partnerships that responded to the crisis of the inner city in the US in that period of violence and of strife. It also emerged from regulations and policies, not just from goodwill. The Community Reinvestment Act, which created specific mandates for financing in low-income neighborhoods, the low-income housing tax credit, which has been responsible for millions of units of affordable housing developed in the cities throughout the US. And it developed from partnering with financial institutions, not a common form of partnership for philanthropy, from creating joint spaces for bringing philanthropy and investment, from bringing market forces and collaboration together to create the possibility of interventions of new tools that would have reach at a scale. But we look today at the challenge of what led to the emergence of this movement, and we recognize that poverty continues to be concentrated, that this challenge that we already heard about in these two great cities of connecting people to opportunity, of creating ways for quality communities to be accessible, that is, communities where it's not only shelter that is provided, but access to jobs, access to good services, the possibility of being part of vibrant communities is a reality. And we know in that sense that we have to move beyond those established forms of collaboration. We have to find ways to create new mechanisms for collaboration to emerge. And so we look together at ways to innovate now on land use, on housing finance, on transit-oriented development. And Mayor Reed mentioned a great example, the Atlanta Beltline, where we are working together with the city, with other philanthropic partners, with financial institutions to create a new mechanism, the Community Land Trust, a mechanism that helps create permanently affordable housing for low-income communities that can then benefit from this great investment that Atlanta is spearheading, the $7 billion investment that Mayor Reed referred to. And that brings me to how should we think about collaboration looking forward, and I'll end with that. And it's clear that if we're going to develop this new generation of collaboration, we're going to have to build from this place-based experiences, but we're going to have to learn and build knowledge, and we're going to have to disseminate this knowledge through extensive networking capacity that really brings the different sectors together. And that brings me to Living Cities, a partnership that has over 20 years of experience in the US, but that is also looking to a new generation of systems change that brings the cities, their chiefs of staff, their key technical resources together, brings government agencies at the federal and local level, and brings philanthropy and financial institutions together. And that's where the next generation of these challenges is. And I hope that as we think of this meeting, of these 3 days here in Paris, and I know the US has a uniqueness of experience, but I think it's an experience that as we look to cities being the basis of shared opportunity to this vision that we heard from Mayor Delanoë last night, that Paris is a successful city, a successful global city, because the whole world is represented in its communities, that it is the diversity of this world represented in Paris, this inclusion, this opportunity that defines the promise of cities. And that as we look to cities around the world growing and becoming the home of the majority of the population, it is that promise of cities. It's realizing that promise of opportunity, of inclusion, of voice and participation that will make us all successful.
Yeah. I hope we return to these issues in the second round. But I wanted to pick up on the question of inequality. And it has really grown. A city like New York, a city like Tel Aviv, a city like, I mean, all these, they're machines, complex machines that can produce enormous wealth. Inevitably, you're going to have inequality. But there are inequalities and there are inequalities. The 1979 census of the United States found that in New York City, the top 1% of earners, who also have other sources of income clearly, received, grabbed, whatever term you prefer, 12% of all the income, I'm talking salaries, generated in New York. Okay, inequality, but reasonable. The 2009 census, the new census, found that that top 1% received / grabbed 44% of all income generated in New York City. That is an inequality that is not good for a city. The best thing that can happen to a city, frankly, of course you want, very enlightened and highly paid whatevers, but you need a vast, modest middle class, because they are going to need the city, they are going to spend their money in the city, you have the multiplier effects, and so these issues that you raised, Pablo, they are absolutely top on the agenda. Now, Vivek, since we have you here with your expertise, how does technology fit into all of this?
Well, indeed, technology is just an enabler in order to help city leaders to achieve this vision. We are just a building block, but a building block that is becoming required more and more. Mayor Reed mentioned the availability of high-speed internet throughout the cities, and certainly Mayor Huldai mentioned the availability of wireless in public spaces. So the first level of what we can bring is, of course, our own infrastructure investment, both in high-speed wireless and high-speed wireline, in cities that are being either built or rebuilt. But that wouldn't be, but that is where you expect us to be as a telecom operator, be putting in capital and investment to make sure that connectivity, which enables creativity, innovation, the creation of new corporations and new economic activity to happen. Beyond that, I think the we recognized over the last few years that there are a number of areas of technology that actually make cities smarter and help them to accelerate the achievement of these visions about a more connected environment. So we set up a program called Smart Cities within Orange around this theme to focus on a number of areas where we feel, humbly but with enthusiasm, that we can bring something to make things work better in cities. And that is around the transportation, processing, and handling of information that makes certain new technologies available that work better for cities. So a few examples. Of course, you can start with cars. Of course, a car is not, a connected car is first of all a car. But with the availability of electrical recharging, it becomes indispensable for a car to be connected. Then there are a number of safety features, traffic management features that require this connectivity. So our ability to partner with a car manufacturer to put in place SIM cards inside cars that interact with local infrastructure, with traffic information, that collect traffic information, or that help you to know where's the next battery recharging place for you to reload your electrical vehicle. These are areas where technology makes things possible that were not possible before. If you take water, and I think there's a session on water at 11 o'clock that where we'll be presenting this, we've partnered as a minority partner, but very involved, with a utility company called Veolia, which is a leading company in the water industry, of course. Yes. And Veolia will be putting in place about 5 million water meters. What does that bring? Of course, it helps to ensure that water supply is monitored better, that wastage is controlled, that leaks can be caught before they have a too significant an impact either on wastage and also on the damages that they create. And that's real-time information that we carry and process to make sure that this information can help the city to work better. In various areas in utilities and with the availability of new sources of energy, the question of managing the grid, managing production places of electricity and where it's consumed to make sure that, for instance, solar panels, that production is not wasted, or that various alternate forms of energy can be consumed locally, that requires tremendous information processing because you need an overall view of both sources and consumption to be able to match demand and supply. And so this availability of information is one of the tools that makes systems more efficient. Finally, I think there's one area which is public transportation, which both mayors alluded to, which I think is key. If you look at the multimodal transportation, when you put in place light rail, when you put in place parking lots outside cities with subsidized or favorable costs in order to prompt people to go into cities with public transportation rather than clog the roads, you need to give them visibility on what's going on where they should park, on where transportation works, where the next train is going to be, because you need them to be able to plan ahead. So very humbly, we feel we can bring this information. They're conveyed on all these smartphones and devices that are available in the customer's hands. And when more than half of the population of in these economies and in cities is using wireless technologies, they have access to this information on their fingertips. So we develop technologies and we work with cities to bring these ecosystems together. And maybe just one message on this, there has been a theory for a long time that the ownership of data was power. And that's been a philosophy that internet companies have worked on, that large corporates overall have worked on. Ownership, first of all, no one owns the customer, but understanding the customer's needs is obviously a key strategic intent for many organizations. But today, the value of this information is completely enhanced by partnering. When you're able to project traffic information, then other organizations can adapt their behavior. And that creates more value than simply selling traffic information. And that's just one example amongst many. So really, if there's one area of partnering that technology would like to bring and that probably will cut across various cities is the idea that data interchange, that the sharing of information, open data initiatives that project data in a transparent way for other entities to create value on top will help cities to put in place these systems organically rather than by central regulation.
Thank you. Now we have about 20 minutes left, and in the second round, I think it would be good to move into challenges, possibilities, partnerships. There are no easy answers, but these are challenges, also conceptual, not just practical. Now, Mayor Huldai, you showed us in the first 5 minutes how a city like Tel Aviv, so far removed from other major cities, succeeded, which is absolutely a very interesting story, very extraordinary. What are your problems? What are the things that you are really not succeeding as well with?
First of all, thank you for asking me this question, because I can answer it very, very clearly. First of all, I would like to start with 2 key words for being a mayor. And this is accessibility and equality. If you will go around and hear to all of these people, respected people that spoke before me, these are the key words: how to create accessibility and have a better equality. You mentioned Wall Street. Unfortunately, the city has no authority to regulate or to be involved in the national law creating equality. This is something that we are not in the business. But once I'm speaking about being a mayor, what are the problems in these days, and I hear it everywhere, and even in Israel, and I spoke about accessibility, it means good, efficient public transportation system, integrated public transportation system. That creates accessibility for jobs, for art, for education. These are the key. Second is, not by mistake, I mentioned Tel Aviv is the smallest, largest city. We are a very small city, municipality, but we are a center of a big metropolis of 3.5 million people that are commuting in and out. And the only way to overcome the obstacles is to create greater Tel Aviv. Participation of cities. If we speak about transportation, is how to bring people from our suburb to the city. And the first time of the historic of the State of Israel, the government of Israel just recognized the necessity of creating a metropolitan authority for transportation to combine everything together. And by the way, first time that the mayor of Tel Aviv is going to be the chairman of this metropolitan authority. This is the first one. The second is not only create greater Tel Aviv, but even the government, if it create not only greater Tel Aviv because we like to do it, but in a way to legalize it and to create greater Tel Aviv, to make our efforts not on a volunteering wish of our neighboring cities, but a kind of a legal instrument. And the third one, and I hear it everywhere in the world, and the worst case is in Israel, and Europe has passed very, very nice process of empowerment of a local government. Give the local government more and more power because governments has no way to manage. As the mayor says, if you want to accomplish something, yes, be a mayor.
Go to a city.
So these are the 3 obstacles that I see for the future of the metropolis of Tel Aviv. And in a way, this is the future of the State of Israel because everything is in Tel Aviv. Thank you.
But let me ask you, how can you, and I know that there are no easy answers to this question, but how can you imagine addressing some of these challenges by dealing with other mayors? Is there, when we're dealing with certain technological...
I have a perfect question.
There we go.
I initiated unionized of the 15 big cities in Israel. We created the 15 big cities as a lobby and an organization working in the parliament to change all of these issues we are just addressed. So we are doing it. We have a collaboration. We are having a metropolitan project for sewage, for garbage, for other issues. We are even thinking to create a metropolitan authority for art. The city of Tel Aviv invests 6% of its total budget in art and culture. The neighboring cities around us, they don't spend money in art and culture because we are doing the job for them. And we are too small to provide everything for the state of Israel. So only by collaboration we can, let's say, do what we have to do better.
That's right. It's like a network platform that you are creating, all these. But let me just push you a bit further. And you may not have an answer, and then I ask you, imagine what it might be. But other cities, when you're doing your work, the hard work of being a mayor, I will ask you that question too. Other cities abroad that ever crossed your radar screen in terms of, we should be asking people, how did they manage to do? For instance, some cities have done very well with public transport in now we're talking mega cities. Huh?
It works. It works. We have already collaboration with Frankfurt.
There we go. That's what I wanted to hear.
Of course, we have collaboration with Frankfurt. We have good collaboration and good relations with Paris. The Veliv project, I got it here and I brought it to Tel Aviv, and we have it today because we are always, by the way, mayors, when they meet each other, in the first moment they find mutual interest. We have the same problems, sometimes different ways of solving the problems.
That's right. But you know, it's very good for the audience to hear these things, that there is much more happening internationally. When I sometimes speak with the press or with...
It can't work not internationally. Today, it's a global world.
Right,
we speak to each other.
Yes.
You have the internet. When I'm here today, I don't have to find replacement in the city because I have my iPhone here and I get information immediately. In time when mayors went 100 years ago abroad, you had to delegate authority, have to sign papers and this kind of thing. The world is changing. When I have a problem, I call the mayor of Atlanta and ask him, what do you think about it? Since I created a net of connections all over the world, some good friends of my friends are mayors, the mayor of Frankfurt, Peter Roth, the mayor of Cologne, the mayor of Essen, the mayor of Paris, mayor of Berlin. Unfortunately, Philadelphia is a twin city, and never been there as a mayor too. But
yeah. And how about you, your city, Mayor Reed?
What I'm saying is that cities are needed more, and the federal governments are getting out of the business of cities because of financial pressures.
Yeah.
So at a time when the energy is around cities, people are coming to cities, innovation is occurring in cities, young people are moving to cities, the federal government is de-investing and de-leveraging. So for example, when we built our rail system, we call it MARTA, that was funded 80-20 by the federal government. There is nothing that the federal government is funding in the city of Atlanta or the state of Georgia at 80% anymore. So at a time when there is a real need, based upon where the economy is going and where the future is going, governments are getting out of that business. So it's forcing us to be smarter and do more. The other real problem we have in the city of Atlanta is so much of the opportunity that I just talked about in my opening presentation is done by people who move into the city from somewhere else. Most of the people who live in the city of Atlanta are not from the city of Atlanta. We don't have a beautiful ocean, we don't have beautiful mountains, we don't have a beautiful lake, but for some reason, people keep moving to this piece of dirt that's in the middle of the state of Georgia. Now, I believe it's our people. I think you can have a very high quality of life and you can be around really smart people because we've got a network of 57 universities and we have a very strong corporate community. The problem is what happens to the young people and the families that lived in this city the whole time who can't reach it. And that's the problem that we have. You have 25 to 30% of our city of people who live at the poverty level or slightly above. Now, because they're in the South, they can still live in affordable fashion. But from a dream standpoint, how can you have all of this wealth? We're getting ready to build a $1 billion football stadium. The question is, can the people who grew up in the city actually afford to go to a football game? So we've really got to start thinking about this connectivity if we're really going to be great. I agree with your conversation about the need to have a robust middle class, and that's why I'm so optimistic. I'm optimistic because really for the first time in my lifetime, it is in our economic interest to deal with poor people and solving the problems of other people because we all care about markets. So if I can now educate a person, just 10 or 20 years ago in the United States, we were not focused on bringing other people along. If you were wealthy, you know, you were in good shape, and if somebody else, there was a cadre of people who cared, like folks at the Ford Foundation, but we generally weren't caring about that. Now you have writers like Thomas Friedman in this book, That Used to Be Us, writing about how the fact that the United States hasn't invested enough in black people, in Latino people, and in rural folks, how that's causing the U.S.'s economy about $400 million a year in lost productivity. So now there's a market interest in bringing that along, because $400 trillion a year is $400 billion is $4 trillion over 10 years. And so that can be used as a way to create new markets in the United States. And because of our selfishness, there's a greater likelihood that we're going to try to solve that problem. Everybody knows that in the United States, the reason our unemployment rate is at 8.2, 8.3% is because we have a large pocket of unfilled jobs, and we have citizens whose training can't reach them. And if you married that, our unemployment rate would be about 5.5, 5.6, Vivek. So that means there are a bunch of Americans who are not adequately trained to reach those jobs, and that's why I think this conversation is so important.
Let me push you a bit. When you think of other cities from whom I'm thinking of, the future partnerships, how cities can collaborate. I noticed that Mayor Huldai said a lot of German cities actually were in your list. I was going to ask you, how about Global South cities? Are there cities around the world that you think of as, for instance, a lot of people who deal with public transport in poor cities think of the Bogota Millennium Transport System, the bus. That comes up, you are in Bangladesh and they bring that up. When you're thinking of your particular issues, it could be transport, it could be other things. Are there other cities around the world that come to your mind that you say, there is a leadership, there is a planning department that I would really like to check out?
Well, I really think about a combination of cities. I mean, I think that all mayors have Paris envy. So you might as well get over that from a planning standpoint.
Great transport system, too.
You have great infrastructure, but I think Charles de Gaulle Airport could be significantly improved, right?
It's not transparent at all. That is correct.
So when I think of, as a leader, beauty matters to me, that's influenced by Paris. I just was in China for 10 days in 5 different cities to see what they have done from an infrastructure standpoint in Shenzhen, a city that didn't exist in 1980, shows you the importance of will. I mean, when you look at China and their infrastructure, although it doesn't have the kind of political freedom that I value, the will to make a decision about what the future is going to look like and execute that will is something that any leader ought to care about passionately. So I think of that. And I certainly think about Tel Aviv from the standpoint of what they have done from a standpoint of being able to secure their city. I have the busiest airport, I have CNN. There's an incredible will in Tel Aviv. I was once in Tel Aviv, and a pizza parlor that had a bomb, I think 3 months before we had been there, was completely rebuilt and active 3 months later and back open, and people were going there. That speaks to the will of a people. And I think about all of those things when I think about your own city. The last point I'd like to make is when you are a mayor, you've got a finite amount of time to do something.
That's right.
And most people take on running for these offices because they want to leave something significant behind, and it creates an urgency to get it done.
Pablo, and we're really beginning to run out of time seriously here. Give us some specific discoveries that you have made in your research. I'm thinking, for instance, the importance, I would think, of any large metropolitan area to try to relocalize some production. The question of urban farming, urban agriculture. There are all these options that are there, very difficult to implement. Do you by any chance know of cases which, and that is also a way of addressing inequality, unemployment, small entrepreneurship in new types of ways, not just a small little business, but say urban farming. New York City on its website proudly says, we have 112 urban farms. New York City. And New York City has a lot of green space, actually. But yes.
But it's all about innovation, and we've heard here in this panel the importance of both mayors as authorities that can in cities address their specific problems and advance innovation, but we also heard about the role of new technology. And I think it is this combination, this capacity to really be able to mobilize the people, deal with their demands, and be held accountable to their demands that makes cities such a core center of this capacity to innovate. So if we look at what we just heard here, the challenge is, what are the systems that are going to enable us to bring into the cities this new generation of innovation? It's not just going to be the established systems, and I think it was very clear here that we have great mayors in countries in which mayors have authority and capacity. That's not the case everywhere.
That's right.
And we have to figure out, how do these systems that are more and more complex as you move into this cross-jurisdiction processes, this coordination that is required, as we look into how national governments coordinate, that's where this next generation of learning and collaboration is going to be critical. And technology helps us, enables us to do that. And it enables us, in that sense, to think of the new systems that are needed, of what is going to be this next generation of collaboration. It may not be just about finance. It may not just be the established public-private partnership models. It may be about technology and access to this technology that will enable people to get jobs. Yesterday in our panel on the Just City, we heard of the great example of Samasource, an innovative new technology company that is basically creating micro work and is able, in that sense, to contract with people living in the slums in Kenya, in Kaivera, in other slums in India, and different countries, by contracting with top-notch technology companies in Silicon Valley that are able to produce jobs, decent-paying jobs, for people in these areas where infrastructure and investment is not sufficient to create the traditional types of jobs. We also are quite aware of the importance of technology in enabling financial inclusion. Banking now is possible for people in conditions that were never before possible. And as we look into these processes of formalization in developing countries, that's a fundamental step when people begin to have access to the mainstream tools of economic participation. So technology, this capacity of local governments to innovate, but fundamentally the systems, to me, are the challenge. How are we going to connect and create this capacity to innovate? As a philanthropy, we always look for that space where we can partner and, in that sense, promote risk-taking. We know that for governments it's very difficult to take risks, to implement things that have not been tested or proven. That's where philanthropy can bring its risk capital, its capacity to fund activities that are innovative, that push the edges, but also where we can bring actors from different sectors together.
So do you have one example where, through the work that you have done, you have actually brought together a perhaps unusual group of cities, particular elements of those cities, to address an issue, and that work? I'm now beginning to wrap up, and the question of partnership I will pursue also further.
Well, let's just take this example of transit systems like the Beltline. We're working on this process in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, where we've created a fund that is financing affordable housing in the transit hubs. Now, the state put the infrastructure there through climate change regulations, through demands for greater efficiency in vehicle miles traveled for their local jurisdictions. But it didn't think through how that would create opportunities for greater access for low-income communities. So we partnered, we created a collaborative of local foundations, civil society groups, organizing groups that put together a fund that is now partnering with the city and financing housing in transit hubs in the Bay Area. Mayors
here. Well, that's a very good example.
Right.
And I think, there probably is a very long list that each one of you can think of these kinds of innovations that mean combining institutions that do not necessarily always talk to each other.
And that need to be tested and then connected with the capacity of mayors to innovate, but also to bring the different players that create knowledge as a base for this to become systemic practice and not just isolated cases.
Exactly, that is what, how does it become the way to do things? Vivek, you don't have quite the last word, but anyhow, how does the technological vector, if you want, help cities to partner? Let's think the future, let's think possibilities, not things that are now being done, but what could be done.
Well, I think there are technology helps to partner when you're in the fundamentals of what our telecomnet business has learned, which is if it's open, if it's standard, if it's accessible to all, then you're able to create value on top of it. And I think there are two dimensions to partnering for cities. One of them is within the city, and I think the enthusiasm of the mayors that we see today should be driven also to break down the silos, to say, well, if I want to achieve the vision of public transportation in my city that requires everyone to have access to optimize these systems so that I can really get the most enjoyable quality of life for my citizens, that means you need to share your information and make sure that those systems can work together. Across cities.
Can you give us some concrete, just if you can, you know, something that nails it down? And like I pushed him, and then he came out with his beautiful example, you know, in San Francisco.
Well, take an example on traffic. Traffic, we bring data from mobile handover in the southwest region of France. That provides traffic information that can be provided to citizens, and we're working with cities in France around this same concept. And that's made available because it helps people to plan their lives. Another example that's more cross-city partnering, and once again, that's the water example. To achieve industrial scale on water meters, if each city designs its own specific water meter, economies of scale don't happen, systems don't get organized, and people live in their island. The Greater Paris region has come together for 5 million water meters and set standards. Standards are a key, and that's where a technology provider like ourselves can really try to help by sharing those standards, sharing those designs, trying to replicate the software, because many cities have similar needs. Our ability to carry concepts, in some cases from new cities in emerging markets, in some cases from the renovation of older cities or the revival of older cities, by sharing these technologies, you achieve scale, you achieve speed to market, and you achieve the standardization that allows the business to create itself.
Thank you very much. Well, regrettably, I could go on talking for hours, but we don't have that luxury. But I think that this combination of the possibilities, the options, the need to think of the city as the strategic space to address all kinds of major challenges, I mean, it really suggests that a lot of what is happening in the world today is too serious to leave it to national governments. We need city governments. All right, thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.